Good morning. It's good to be with you. Good to be with you here and folks out in Zoom land. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes just to give you a sense of what to expect. I know I always like it when I'm hearing somebody talk. It's like, is this going to be an hour? Is this going to be 2 minutes? So I'm guessing about 10 minutes. This is kind of the start of a new process for us in our consideration of having a pastoral team rather than a single pastor, as we do now with Charlotte. There's been a lot of discussion over the past couple years about this, and we're entering kind of a new phase where we want to invite the entire congregation to consider it. So that's what is starting today, and after my speaking today, in the next few days, the trustees will send out an email to all the congregants with what I'm saying, repeating it, giving some more details, but something that you can have in your hand to consider so you don't all have to take notes now. And then in 2 weeks, the plan is to have an actual discussion here in person with people who want to respond to it and ask questions, and we will do our best to do that. So this is kind of the start of that process, to talk about exactly what this idea is. For some of you, it's new. For some of you, you've heard about it, but there's not a lot of details. So we want to start to give some of those details and answer some questions. If we have answers, sometimes we won't have answers, and just all start to consider together what this possibility is. So with that said, let's talk about what this possibility is. And I've just got 3 slides, if you want to count them. I've got 3 slides. So the first one talks about what this actually is. What are we talking about when we talk about multiple pastors? So practically, this means having 2 pastors, and each pastor working 3/4 time. So if you add the 2 pastors, 3/4 time each, that comes out to 1.5 pastors, so to speak. I don't know if you can quite do that math with a person, but the amount of time would be kind of 1.5 pastors. And each of these pastors would be responsible for kind of a well-defined area of the church, as well as having joint shared responsibilities and working together in plenty of things. So on a very practical level, that is what has been talked about, a lot of discussion. Is this a model that would be good? Is this a model that would work? And this is kind of the current proposal. So an immediate question might be, why do this? What do we think is the value of moving to this model? Those of us, again, who have considered this have kind of come up with 3 possible or 3 compelling reasons that we think this would be a good model to move to. One, just generally, is better able to carry out the mission of the church. I mean, that is our purpose here is a gathering. We have a mission, we have a shared purpose together, and we feel that moving this to this model will help us in that effort. At a very practical level, moving from 1.0 pastors to 1.5 obviously provides more full-time effort in the pastoral work. There's also, along with that, there's a clear focus for our pastors to do. Part of our process the past couple years has been to define what we call mission areas, and each of the pastors would have a focus in 2 of these mission areas. And I'll say them quickly now. They will be in the written communication with more of a description, but these 4 mission areas are invitation and presenting the gospel, Christian formation, spiritual life, that's 2. 3 is community life and community, common life and community, excuse me. And 4 is reconciliation and restoration. So again, I won't take the time now to try to define those exactly, but it gives you a sense of these are areas that are important to our mission, and the plan is that the pastors could focus on certain areas along with their shared responsibilities. So rather than, well, the pastor just does pastoral things, whatever that is, these are fairly well-defined areas that further our mission as a church. So that's one of the whys, is to better able to focus on those things. Another one is just the value of shared leadership. One of those values is that it models kind of what we want to be as a church, to have shared responsibility. So having that at the leadership level kind of models what we already do and what we want to be doing, which is a lot of shared participation. Another value is it's more sustainable. Rather than, Charlotte being the buck always stops at her and there's a lot of decisions to make, having a collaborator to work with day to day, week to week, as you might imagine, is a good thing to have and is more sustainable model for us as a church. Along with that, there's a certain amount of flexibility. The roles that the pastors play over time can shift as needs happen, or if somebody's gone, just taking a vacation or for whatever reason needs to be gone, there's an obvious kind of shared responsibility that provides more flexibility. So those are just some values of this. A final thing I'll mention for the why are we recommending this, is that we all have certain gifts. And it is quite possible when you have one pastor to kind of expect this person to fit all the roles and have all the gifts that any of us might expect a pastor to do. And we all know biblically, we all know practically that's not realistic to expect one person to have deep gifts in all the areas. It is no slight to anybody, including Charlotte, to say she does not score a 10. The point is, on all the areas. So, the point is, Charlotte has deep gifts in many areas, and the goal is, or the hope is, to focus on those areas. And other people have deep gifts in other areas. And so it's a natural model to have people focus on the areas where their passion is, where their gifts are, where God calls them to be. So the hope is, in this model, to have that kind of ability to focus on different areas. So that's a little bit about the what and the why, which brings us to maybe the obvious question of when, or as some of you might be saying, when already? Over the past couple of years, many of us have been considering this possibility. I mean, it started with Charlotte coming to the trustees, just in case people were wondering, does Charlotte support this? We got the kick in the pants, so to speak, from Charlotte coming to the trustees and say, hey, I want you all to consider if we can make this happen. Trustees asked a group of 8 people in the congregation, the Pastoral Staffing Task Force, to consider this. This is right before the pandemic, and we continued through the pandemic on our Zoom calls and came up with these mission areas and several other aspects of this. This came back to the trustees. The trustees asked a couple people, Mike Iverson, Nancy Schmidt, Mary Kay Conley, to start thinking about what would the details actually be to do this hiring. And that brings us to today. So here we are. It's time for all of us. We've had these different groups, and now we are opening this discussion up to everybody for consideration and prayer. It brings us to the present day. We invite all of you, all of us who call Reba Place our home community, to consider if this is where God is calling us. So, as I mentioned, in the next couple of days, we will be sending out via email the same information I'm sharing now, along with some additional details. And we encourage you to pray about it, to discuss it with others, to test if it seems good to you, if it's something that you could support and commit to. In 2 weeks' time from today, we plan to have some discussion after our Sunday service, when we can all talk together, raise questions, and grow in understanding the value of this change, this important change in our church. And then ultimately decide if it's something that we can commit to, if it's something that we want to commit to as a church. So, an important part, some of you are probably thinking this already, an important part of this process is figuring out the finances. Can we afford to do this? As you might imagine, moving from a single full-time pastor to 2 pastors who work a total of 1.5 time will require an increase in the church budget. While there's variations on, how much of an increase, there are various things that might affect that, the amount of increased giving required. A ballpark number that we've been using in our discussions for this change would be that it requires an additional $36,000 a year, or about $3,000 a month. Like I say, there's variations that might affect that, but if it helps to think like, well, what are we talking about from a budget point of view? That is about the number that we are looking at. So before inviting applicants for this new position and before interviewing candidates, we do need a sufficient level of affirmation from the congregation, from you all, that this is what we want to do and this is what we want to commit to. And part of that affirmation will be a verbal agreement, a discussion and people saying, yes, this seems good and right to us. Another part of that confirmation will be, can we as a community show financially that we support this? In other words, can we increase our giving through our offering in a way that demonstrates our commitment to making this change happen? We want to be wise in our planning. To use the tower building analogy from Luke 14, we want to estimate the cost and know if we have enough money to complete the tower. In this case, know if we actually have what it will require to go through with the interview process and the hiring and have this change in our pastoral staffing. So we're not sure yet exactly how we will have that commitment demonstrated, but that is an important part of our process, to not just say, yeah, sounds great, but to have some confirmation or confidence that it will actually be possible. So that is all I have to share today. I don't know if I made it within my 10-minute expectation. Yes, we have a question. Yeah, I appreciate that. Sure. So I understand that questions have come in, which is perfect, which is what this whole process that we're initiating is about. If it's a question about which week are we meeting, I'm glad to answer that now. If it's a question about the exact why are we doing this, or what's the value, then that is quite appropriate to talk about in 2 weeks' time during our meeting. I'm not expecting to take the time right now, partly because we don't have the time right now, and partly because I wouldn't be the sole person answering the questions. But I'm not going to try to answer some of those questions now, but we should all be asking them, asking them of ourselves, are we ready? Asking what would this actually look like? So I'm expecting, unless you tell me otherwise, Stephen, that is more the nature of kind of some of those details, which are the kind of questions that we should, or that I expect to respond to, and for all of us to consider, over the next 2 weeks, over the next 2 months, but specifically have this time in 2 weeks to respond or to ask them and consider together. So, thank you for your time. Look forward to continuing the discussion.